Hello and welcome to the Clarity Stripes NCAA men's basketball bracket breakdown show for the 2021 NCAA tournament. I'm your host, Liam Plate, and I'll be joined by Jorie Mickens and Alex Leyboldt for this one. And guys, there's a lot to get into, but before we get into any basketball talk, how are you guys doing?
Not too bad. I'm having a good time. I'm ready for this tournament to start. I'm really looking forward to seeing how this breaks down.
Agreed. Yeah, I'm doing good, Liam. Thank you for asking. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. I'm doing well. Ready to talk some basketball. I'm excited for this tournament too. Thanks for asking, Jory. But we'll get right into it, guys. And the number one seeds for this season, you got Gonzaga, number one overall seed, then Baylor across the way on the top side of the bracket, and then Michigan and Illinois filling out the bottom part. This is a very highly contested top five all year. It changed in and out throughout the season. But for you guys, did the committee get it right? Jory, we'll start with you.
I think Gonzaga and Illinois were locks to be number one seeds. Gonzaga was undefeated this season. And despite playing in the West Coast Conference, I think they get a lot of flack for that every season. They took care of a lot of the top teams during the regular season. They beat Kansas, Auburn, West Virginia, Iowa, and Virginia during their non-conference schedule. They obviously won their conference tournament, and their big three of Jalen Suggs, Drew Timme, and Corey Kispert is probably one of the best three-headed duos in the entire country. So I think Gonzaga's certainly a lock. And then Illinois winning the Big Ten tournament. They have Ayo Dosunmu and Kofi Coburn, probably one of the best inside-out duos in the nation. So those two teams, I think, were certainly to be locks. Baylor also, I think, definitely deserving of a number one seed. I think really the only seed that was somewhat questionable was Michigan. But I mean, I think
Yeah,
the
I agree.
did a good job.
I was actually also going to say I think Michigan was the one that I would have maybe replaced with like Alabama. I think Alabama just came off of winning the SEC championship and they've won 7 of their last 8. I know Michigan lost to Ohio State in the Big Ten, and they also lost to Illinois in this. So I thought maybe they could have given it to Alabama instead. But other than that, I think the Baylor, Gonzaga, Illinois are all deserving.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think they did a solid job picking these one seeds out, and I do think that Bama could have slid in there. I think I think Michigan was probably the one team that they could have took out since Illinois won the Big Ten tournament. But I know, Alex, you mentioned Alabama, but any other teams that you could have seen sliding into the one line that just underperformed towards the end of the season?
Maybe Ohio State could have snuck in too. I know they had a strong season. They did beat Michigan in the tournament. I'm pretty sure they won the tournament, right? The Big Ten.
I think Illinois won the Big Ten.
Yeah,
Or Illinois won the Big Ten. My bad.
Ohio State was in the championship game
They
against
made it to the
Illinois, so you're
championship
right
game.
there.
Yeah.
One team for myself. I know that this is probably a stretch because they're, I believe, a 4 seed, Oklahoma State. I mean, I think the fact that they got a 4 seed is just outright disrespectful. They took down plenty of the top teams in their conference throughout the regular season. I think Cade Cunningham is arguably the best player in the entire country right now. And that's not even like, and we can't even disregard the rest of that roster. You have Caleb Boone, Avery Anderson, Isaac Likely. Like that whole team is incredible. And them getting a 4 seed is pretty nuts to me. I think they definitely deserve the higher seed. Maybe not a 1 seed, but definitely a higher seed.
Yeah, I think I mean that Cade Cunningham, man, he's something. I think he's like definitely like number one overall pick when it comes to next year's draft. But both solid picks. I was thinking the same thing. I think Ohio State could have made a push there, but I mean the main team for me was Bama. I think
Yeah.
this Alabama team is really good, and I'm excited to see what they do in the tournament. But before we get into each region, we're going to take a look at the teams that didn't make it to the tournament, unfortunately. So looking at the teams like based off the first 4 out and then the next 4 out, What teams? What's the team that didn't make the cut that you think maybe should have deserved a better shot?
I think Louisville kind of got the short end of the stick, especially because they had a pretty big COVID break. All of their losses were to teams that are currently in the tournament, except for Duke. And they did miss both Syracuse games. And I guess their biggest loss, they had a 6-point loss to Miami this year, which probably took a pretty big dent into their chances to get in.
Yeah, one team for myself, Colorado State. They're in the Mountain West Conference. They lost to Utah State in their tournament semifinals, and Utah State is an 11 seed this year. So I think it does make sense that, if Utah State is an 11 seed, you're probably not going to send a team that lost to them in the semifinals in their conference tournament to the tournament as well. But I mean, they had some nice wins against San Diego State and Utah State actually during the regular season. They were 18-6 this year, 14-4 in their conference. So I think they maybe could have snuck in there, but they are the top seed in the NIT, so I guess they have that going for them.
Yeah, and then Jorie kind of going the same wave as you. Another team that has a top seed in the NIT, Ole Miss. I think Ole Miss had a good shot. They had a few good wins. They beat Mizzou twice. They beat Auburn a couple times, I believe, as well. And I think if they went a little bit further in the SEC tournament, they would have had a better shot at making it. But I think that Ole Miss team was very talented, and I think that they definitely could have a shot. But now they're sitting at the top of the NIT along with Colorado State there. So that should be an interesting tournament to see who ends up there. But, enough about the NIT, enough about the team, the guys not in the tournament. Let's get to the players in the tournament and the teams, though. Let's start off with the West region with the top seed Gonzaga Bulldogs, and you got the top 4 seeds in that region. Number 1, Gonzaga. Number 2, Iowa. Number 3, Virginia. And number 4, for Virginia, I think number 3, Kansas. Excuse me on that one. But then looking at this bracket overall, any matchups that particularly pique your interest that you're going to be definitely tuned into?
One matchup that I was looking at was the Oklahoma-Missouri game, the 8 versus the 9. Missouri, they've lost 7 of their last 10, so they're kind of going through a little rough patch. Oklahoma has had a tougher schedule, and they have a better conference record. So they could really pull something off and see through. They have to play Gonzaga in the second round, but they can make it through.
Well, I think this part of the bracket, honestly, is the best side of the bracket in the entire tournament. The fact that Oregon is a 7th seed in this side of the bracket is pretty ridiculous. And then obviously you have, like you mentioned, Liam, Gonzaga, Iowa, Kansas, Virginia. I mean, this side of the bracket is absolutely stacked. But one matchup that could potentially happen in the second round, if both teams can take care of their business in the first round, in the round of 64, is Creighton versus Virginia. Creighton, who as Seton Hall fans we're pretty familiar with, and how good their offense is. Virginia has been one of the best defensive teams in the country this season, so that would be a really fun 4-5 matchup in the round of 32. But they have to take care of business in the round of 64.
Yeah, I'm going to follow Jorie's path a little here. I'm going to go with kind of like a round of 32 matchup that I think could be cool. I think Iowa and Oregon, that could be an interesting matchup with that one. I mean, Oregon getting the 1 seed in the Pac-12 tournament, and then, but falling short to Oregon State as they won that one. Congrats to them, the first time in the tournament ever. But then I think Iowa is a team who started out the season very strong, but just hasn't been there towards the end, really haven't been as strong because they were on that 1 line there for a little bit throughout the year, but now they're on the 2. But I do think that could be a good game. But kind of looking at it next, one thing about NCAA March Madness is the upsets. So, guys, looking at these first round matchups, any potential upsets that you could see happening?
I know this one's tough. I was thinking about Ohio being a dark horse for this first round against Virginia. They've won 5 of their last 6. They just came off the American Conference Championship. So they're really rolling with a good stride against Virginia. And I know Virginia is a great team, and they have, they did have their quarantine So I'm pretty sure they're not leaving for the tournament until Friday. And if they don't get there on time, they're not eligible to play. And I know that if that's the case, Louisville replaces them. So that could even be an easier matchup for Ohio, but Louisville could also take that one.
Yeah, I think just overall, this tournament is going to be one of the most unpredictable tournaments in the history of NCAA men's basketball tournaments, just because the whole COVID-19 situation impacting what could happen, and that kind of plays a part in who I think could be upset in this one. That being Kansas, I think they would be in the second round if USC can take care of their matchup in the first round. I think USC has a good shot of taking down Kansas, who I believe is a 3 seed, you said, Liam. But Kansas might be without their star big man, David McCormick, who I believe tested positive for had a positive test, and he might not be traveling with the team this week. So depending on how long he's out, that could definitely have a big impact, especially since USC has two of the most dominant front court players in the country in the Mobley brothers, Evan and Isaiah. So that could definitely provide a huge problem for the Jayhawks, depending on how that plays out.
Yeah, Alex, I kind of had my eye on that Virginia Ohio one. I think Ohio's a pretty good team, pretty underrated. So I think that's a solid one that could be picked. But then another one I'm looking at is I think the whoever wins the Wichita State or Drake play-in game could possibly maybe upset USC, because I think Drake's has had a great season. Starting out undefeated for a good amount of time, being ranked for a little bit, but then choking pretty much in their conference tournament, not able to get the job done and get the automatic bid, which definitely dropped them to the first four. But then I think Wichita State is always one of those teams that you never know what's going to happen with them come tournament time, and always an interesting team to watch. And I think that very solid squad this year once again. But then, looking at this region, each year you kind of have a team that could, in each region, you're kind of like, this could be a team that could make a Final Four run. So, I mean, looking at the West region, who's your dark horse in this one?
I'd probably say maybe even Creighton has a good shot if they can get lucky, if in a good game against Gonzaga, or if Ohio is an underdog against Virginia and they pull through with the win. Creighton could see themselves getting into the Elite Eight, and all they would have to do is just get past Gonzaga. So maybe they could.
Yeah, this is going to be tough for this region, especially because I think Gonzaga is just the best team overall in the entire tournament. So picking a dark horse from this region is certainly more difficult than the others, but I think I would have to agree with Alex. I think Creighton, just because we're pretty familiar with them, I know that they have the offensive firepower to maybe hang with a team like Gonzaga, even though Gonzaga has essentially the best offense in the entire nation. But I think Creighton, maybe if they can catch the Zags on a good night, maybe they could take them down.
Yeah, I think Creighton is a good team. I think they're one of those teams that they got a lot of seniors, and I think that's kind of been what college basketball is trending towards more a little bit, that the teams making the deep runs are not so much more these one and done teams, but more so the programs that have guys coming back consistently year in and year out. But another team that I think Oregon has a good shot. I think Iowa's a talented team. I think they're a very beatable team too. So I could see Oregon making a run maybe to the Sweet 16. I could see them being an upset there, which could be interesting. But then, guys, looking at this region, each team's goal is to get to the Final Four. So out of this region, out of the West region, who's your Final Four pick?
I think it's got to be Gonzaga here.
Yeah, agreed. I think Gonzaga's a lock. I mean, they have four of probably some of the best players in the nation. I will be very surprised if they don't make it to the Final Four.
Yeah, I think it's going to be Gonzaga all across the board. I think this Gonzaga team I think this is the best one they've had in a while. I mean, obviously going undefeated, but I think no way this team doesn't make it to the Final Four. I think they got a good shot, but so it looks like Gonzaga out of the West region from our panel here. But then let's take a look and move over to the South region, and the top 4 seeds are right across the way on the top side of the bracket. You got Baylor, the number 1 seed, Ohio State, the number 2, Arkansas from the SEC, the number 3, and Purdue from the Big Ten, the number 4 seed. And guys, once again, we're going to run through the same questions. Any matchups really that really pique your interest, or you're like, this I need to watch this game?
I think the 8-9 matchup between Wisconsin and UNC is going to be a fun game. I think even though Wisconsin is technically, theoretically, the lower seed, I think the Badgers, I think they could take down UNC in that one, because Wisconsin, they don't really make a lot of mistakes, whereas UNC is a pretty volatile team. They got a lot of younger players, I think. So I think Wisconsin might be able to take that one, but that'll certainly be an entertaining matchup.
I'm looking forward to seeing how Villanova does in this first round, especially without Colin Gillespie. We haven't really seen much of Winthrop University. They haven't played any games this season against a top 25 team. They are averaging more points per game than Villanova, however, so anything is possible. They have a 23-1 record.
Yeah, both solid matchups. I think one that I want to keep my eye on is the 7-10 matchup between Florida and Virginia Tech. I think two pretty evenly balanced teams that would match up pretty well with each other. So I do think I am interested to see how that one goes. I would give the advantage to the Hokies just because I think they're a bit of a better team and a little bit underseeded after playing well in the ACC and finishing high in that conference this year. But guys, once again, looking at it, potential upsets, any double-digit seeded teams you got to keep an eye on.
Well, like I was saying before with Winthrop, they have a very versatile team. They have 11 players on their roster that are averaging more than 10 minutes a game. So they have a constant flow of players. So it's going to be really hard for Villanova to keep track of who's on the court, and they won't really be able to find much film with them playing against good teams.
Yeah, I think also another double-digit seeded team, Utah State, they drew Texas Tech in the first round. I think they actually have a good shot of taking down the Red Raiders. Texas Tech, their defense has been pretty inconsistent this season, whereas Utah State has one of the most dominant big men in the nation, Amias Queta. So I think if they catch the Red Raiders on a bad night, I think Utah State could take them down.
Yeah, definitely had my eye on that Nova Winthrop matchup and Utah State and Texas Tech. I mean, Texas Tech is one of those teams that you don't know which team's going to show up night in and night out. But then another matchup I want to look at just a little bit is I'm really interested to see this Arkansas and Colgate matchup. I think, Colgate's on 14-1, so they've only played 15 games, and Arkansas I think is a solid team. And obviously doing very well in the SEC this year. But I think that's going to be interesting because I think Colgate's pretty hot right now after winning their conference tournament, and I think they definitely could have a good shot to take down Arkansas. But then looking to the next one, kind of like a similar thing. Who's the region's dark horse? Who's a team that you could see making a run to the Sweet 16, Elite Eight that people might not expect?
You mentioned Arkansas, Liam, because I think that is the dark horse in this region. I mean, they did lose to a lot of they struggled against a lot of the top teams in the country, losing to Tennessee. They lost to LSU twice. They lost to Alabama and Oklahoma State. So they did fall to a lot of these tournament teams, and that is obviously problematic. But as a team themselves, they really don't have a lot of weaknesses, and they have a lot of talent. Moses Moody is just one player who might even get drafted this year after this season. So they have six players who have gone for at least 20 points in a game this year. So they have a lot of depth, I think, and that's going to be important, especially during this tournament with but could potentially have a lot of COVID absences. I think they have a lot of depth, and that could play a big role down the stretch.
I was actually also going to point out Arkansas. They've won 12 of their last 13 games. They lost to LSU in the conference semifinals, but they're in good form right now. Other than that one loss, they led the SEC in scoring. I think they had around 83 points per game. They were second in rebounding, and he was talking about how strong a lineup they have. They could really make a push, and if they have to play Ohio State in the Elite Eight or Baylor in the Elite Eight, they could definitely push past them, I think.
Yeah, I think Arkansas is a good pick for dark horse. I'm the only reason I bring up that first round one, I just think Colgate's a little hot, so I think that could be a good game. Maybe an upset, but I think expect a close game in that one. But then looking at dark horses, I guess going back to a team that Jorie brought up, I think Texas Tech. I think they're an interesting squad. I think I like Mac McClung there. I think he's a talented player, and I think that if everything's clicking for them, they can be a very dangerous team, and I think that they could have the potential to kind of make a run there. But then, guys, with all this Final Four talk, we got to pick a team once again. So, out of the South region, who is your team to go to the Final Four?
I think out of this region, I think you have to pick Baylor just because, they are the number one seed, and then we went chalk last time picking Gonzaga, but I mean Baylor, they were just absolutely dominant throughout the entire season. They have Jared Butler, Davion Mitchell, Mark Vital, Maceo Teague, Matthew Mayer. Like that their entire team is just absolutely loaded, and I can't see them really losing up until at least the Final Four. But I actually, and I think I made two brackets. I think I have them in the championship game in both. So
I was also going to say Baylor's the probable lock for me. I was thinking if they have a bad day in the Final Four, Arkansas or Ohio State could sneak their way in, but they started 18-0. They only lost 2 games in the last 4. I think this one's theirs to lose.
I'll go against the grain here a little bit, and I'll pick Ohio State. I think that they got a good squad. I think they put up a good fight against Illinois in the Big Ten championship game, and I think that they'll learn from that loss and that experience, and I think that they'll be able to carry it into the big moments here coming up in the tournament. But let's head over to the East region on the opposite side, so right below Gonzaga's region. In the West. So top 4 seeds there are number 1, Michigan from the Big Ten, number 2, Alabama from the SEC, number 3, Texas from the Big 12, and number 4, Florida State from the ACC. So 4 of the best conferences represented in the top 4 seeds there, and all very good teams. So, but guys, looking at the bracket initially, any matchups here that you want to tune into?
I think there's a lot of really good first round matchups in this region. LSU versus St. Bonaventure is a good one. Colorado versus Georgetown. Obviously, Georgetown coming off the Big East tournament championship, and then UConn versus Maryland. I think all 3 of those games could really go either way. You could see some upsets. You can see some chalk, but this is going to be very hard. This region, I think, is going to be one of the hardest to predict.
Yeah, I was looking at that Colorado Georgetown game too. A lot of good round of 64 matches here. I think Georgetown could really pull off an upset. Colorado have won 6 straight before they lost to Oregon State in the final of their conference championship. Georgetown did have to beat, as we know, Seton Hall, Nova, and Creighton on their way to the Big East championship. I think if Georgetown can just keep that flow going and keep that momentum, they'll be able to really put up a fight against Colorado here.
Definitely matchups you're going to want to look out for. I do like that UConn Maryland one, but the one that I really like is the LSU St. Bonaventure one. St. Bonaventure coming off the A10 championship. I think the best team in the A10, and then LSU obviously losing in the SEC championship there to Bama, and I think that one is going to make up for a really interesting 8-9 matchup. And I think whoever advances could give Michigan a run for their money. I don't know if they'll be able to beat Michigan, but I do think they could make it a close game. But I know you guys mentioned a few upsets a little bit, but I mean, any potential upsets that you see happening here?
I think the Georgetown-Colorado matchup is definitely a possibility just because of how hot Georgetown is coming into the tournament. Everyone, I think, is going to look at their record and say, oh, they were just one game over 500, 13-12 record. But it was really a tale of two seasons for that Hoyas team. And once their Northwestern transfer, Chudier Bio, entered their rotation, they went 10-4 and obviously won the Big East tournament as well. So they have a really good momentum entering this game. Whereas, you guys mentioned Colorado falling to Oregon State in the Pac-12 championship. So it definitely could be, it could go either way, but I think Georgetown has a really good shot.
One of my dark horses that I was looking at was actually Michigan State. They have to play their first game against UCLA for the first four. They have 5 wins in their last 7, and 3 of those wins are against top 5 teams. They had an early Big Ten exit, which I think is why they had a little bit of a falling in their rank. And I think their defense will be able to push them through past UCLA and maybe even past BYU.
Yeah, I mean, I was gonna keep my eye on that Georgetown matchup too. I think Georgetown is gonna be a dangerous team, and I think that they definitely could upset Colorado. And Alex, I was thinking the same thing. I think Michigan State. I think they'll beat UCLA, and I think they had a good shot to upset BYU there in the 6-11 matchup. But I know Alex. I know you mentioned Michigan State a little bit as your dark horse. But then Jorie, you got a dark horse in this one, and then Alex, you can if there's another team that pops out to you, just let us know.
Yeah, I think the dark horse in this region is Florida State. I think they have a serious shot at making the Final Four. They are a little inconsistent on both sides of the basketball, but I mean they have what it takes, at least defensively, to disrupt basically any team in this tournament. And I think UConn is another team that could potentially make a lot of noise in this side of the bracket. I mean, with James Bouknight, he's one of the best players in the tournament. So this is certainly going to be a tough one to predict. But there's a lot of really good teams, a lot of dark horse potential in this one.
I was also going to point out Florida State University. I think that their defense, they're able to really stop opponents from shooting inside the arc, which is really good. They'll be able to contain their way into the Final Four. Maybe they could sneak past Michigan on a bad day. That's probably my biggest dark horse for the Final Four.
Yeah, I think Florida State's a solid pick. A dark horse that I have for maybe like the Sweet 16, I think could make a run is Georgetown. I think they're really hot. I really like their play style. I think Patrick Ewing is a great coach, and I think they definitely have a shot to make a run there. But we had a little Final Four talk, and we had our Final Four, picking out our Final Fours here. So who's your third team coming out of the East region?
I picked Florida State to come out of this region. Actually, I don't necessarily believe in Michigan as much, I think, as other people do. Alabama, I think they're one of the hottest teams coming off that SEC championship, but I think Florida State has the defense to really get it done in this side of the bracket. So I'm picking Florida State.
My pick is going to be Alabama here. They have SEC's Defensive Player of the Year, Herbert Jones. Their coach, Nate, won SEC Coach of the Year, or Nate Oates, I mean, sorry. Their defense, they led the SEC in rebounds and steals per game, so they're pretty locked down. Their offense is just as good as their defense, so I could see them really causing trouble through this side of the bracket.
Yeah, I think I'm going to go with Bama too. I think they're a really good team coming off that SEC championship, like you said, Alex. And I don't know. I think they're really hot right now, and I think that they can definitely take down Michigan if it comes down to in the Elite Eight. But let's move over quickly to the Midwest region. Top four seeds there are number one, Illinois out of the Big Ten. Number two, Houston out of the American Athletic Conference. Number three, West Virginia out of the Big 12. And then number four, Oklahoma State, also out of the Big 12. So, guys, any matchups here that really pique your interest?
I was looking at this 8-9 matchup in the first round, Loyola Chicago versus Georgia Tech. Loyola Chicago's defense is really good. They've allowed less than 60 points a game. They've had one loss in the past 2 months. They're Missouri Valley Conference champions. Georgia Tech just came off their ACC tournament win. They're riding on 8 straight wins too. So these are two teams both in great form. Loyola at 24-4, 16-2 for conference. Georgia Tech 17-8, 11-6. This is going to be a really good matchup to see who goes and plays Illinois probably.
Yeah, and speaking of Illinois, I think a potential third-round matchup between Oklahoma State and Illinois is something that really intrigues me. Obviously, Ayo Dosunmu and Cade Cunningham are two of the best players in the entire tournament, but they both have incredible teams built around them. And, I think that would be a really, really fun matchup. I think that would be in the Sweet 16, so that could potentially happen.
A potential matchup that I'm really looking forward to if it does happen, and both of these teams hang on, would be Oklahoma State and Tennessee. I think both really talented teams, and I think that from two big conferences could be huge. But then moving on to our next one, guys, any potential upsets here in this Midwest region?
I honestly wouldn't be surprised if Rutgers were to upset Clemson in the first round. I think Clemson getting a 7th seed was a little questionable. I think it's a little too high. I think they probably are more of a 9 or 10 seed even. So I think this matchup is a lot closer than people are going to project it to be. Rutgers obviously great defensively, whereas Clemson really struggles to score even against some mediocre defenses. So I think the Scarlet Knights could take down Clemson in round one.
I was looking at the same thing. If Rutgers is having a good day, they could really beat anybody. They beat Illinois back in December, so it's really on Rutgers if they're ready to show up against Clemson.
Yeah, I think Rutgers definitely has a good shot. But a matchup I want to highlight is Syracuse and San Diego State. I think Syracuse has a good shot of upsetting the Aztecs there in the first round, a 6-11 matchup, and it could make for a great West Virginia Cuse second round matchup there in the first weekend. But guys, kind of looking at again, a lot of teams can make a run to the Final Four. This is a very tough region. So who's the dark horse here in this one?
I actually had San Diego State. I know you have Syracuse as the upset, but they're coming off a conference championship. They're 23-4, 14-3 in the conference, coming off of 14 straight wins. They also haven't lost in 2 months. I could definitely see them making their way into the Sweet 16, maybe even the Elite Eight against. I could see them beating Houston maybe if they have a good day. If Houston's off.
Yeah, and I think in this region, Oklahoma State is undoubtedly a dark horse. Cade Cunningham, I'm going to keep saying it. He's one of the best players in college basketball. But, I mean, they beat Baylor in the Big 12 tournament. They beat Texas Tech twice during the regular season, Oklahoma twice during the regular season, Kansas during the regular season, and then Texas and West Virginia. So, I mean, they're battle-tested. They've beaten a lot of these teams in the tournament. They know what it takes to knock down some of the top teams. So I think Oklahoma State is definitely someone to watch out for.
Yeah, I think my dark horse definitely has to be Oklahoma State or Tennessee. I like both those teams, and I think whoever wins that matchup between them or comes out of that little section there could give Illinois a run for their money once it comes time in the Sweet 16 and advance to the Elite Eight and possibly get a Final Four bid. I think there. But speaking of the Final Four, guys, who is your Final Four pick to come out of the Midwest region?
I mean, I think that being said, I know Oklahoma State could match up with Illinois. I think I have to pick Illinois to come out of this one. I think their 1-2 punch with Dosunmu and Coburn is too deadly. And even without Ayo Dosunmu, Illinois still took down Michigan pretty handily in Ann Arbor. So they're a team that has what it takes to get to the Final Four and potentially even win it all.
Yeah, I was also going to say Illinois. In my bracket, I actually have Illinois winning it all. I think they were missing Dosunmu for a couple days or a couple matches, and I'm pretty sure they went 3-1, and they really proved that they didn't need one of their best players, if not their best player. So that just shows that they're ready to go into this tournament and really wreak havoc on the entire division.
Yeah, guys, I think both make solid picks here. I'm going to have to go with Illinois too. I think they're probably the best team in this region. I think winning the Big Ten in the best conference in college basketball it says a lot about this team and the way they play. I think they're very, very talented. But over the course of this show, I've been asking you guys to make your Final Four picks, and I have kept track of your Final Four picks. So now I'm going to ask you guys to pick a national champion and a championship game. So, Alex, we'll start with you. Your Final Four, you had Gonzaga, Alabama, Baylor, and Illinois, and with Gonzaga and Bama playing, and then Baylor and Illinois. So what's your national championship, and who's your national champion?
My national championship game is going to look like, I think Alabama is going to top Illinois, is going to lose to Gonzaga here in the Final Four, and I think Illinois is going to top Baylor on the other side. And then with that, I think Illinois is going to be the team that'll take the cake. I know this one's really open to argument, but I think Illinois is the top dog in the country right now. Their defense is really elite, and their offense, we were just talking about it, they could really outplay anybody if they really wanted to, if they're having their day. So if they really, are in good form for this whole tournament, they could really just breeze by.
All right, now we'll move to our other analyst, Jorie. And Jorie, your Final Four, you had Gonzaga, Florida State, Baylor, and Illinois, which Gonzaga would play Florida State, and then Baylor would play Illinois. So, Jorie, who's your national championship game matchup, and who's your national champion?
Yeah, I think the championship game is going to be between Gonzaga and Baylor, and I think the Zags are going to get it done. I think Mark Few is finally going to achieve, that elusive NCAA championship. I just think this team is, like you said earlier in the show, Liam, this is the best team Gonzaga's had in a very, very long time. Their team is just absolutely loaded. They might have 2, maybe even 3 first-round NBA draft picks on their team at the moment. And these two teams, Gonzaga and Baylor, were supposed to meet and play against one another back in December, but that game was canceled. So I think college basketball fans could finally get the matchup that they've been wanting between probably the two best teams in the entire country.
Both solid picks. I think Illinois is a good pick. Obviously, a very good team. And Jorie, I think this Gonzaga team and Mark Few, he's been there since the beginning as an assistant coach when Gonzaga really started to make a name for themselves in the tournament back in the 90s. And I think that'd be awesome for him to get his elusive first national championship. But then looking at my Final Four, I had Gonzaga, Alabama, Ohio State, and Illinois, with the Zags and the Crimson Tide playing each other, and then Ohio State and Illinois, a little Big Ten matchup there. But I actually think I have Alabama topping Gonzaga in that Final Four game. I like this Gonzaga team. I think they're good. The only thing that scares me is that undefeated record. I don't like teams coming into the tournament undefeated. It hasn't happened since 1976 with the team winning the national title with Indiana then, and like it happened with that Kentucky team that went 38-0. And then 38-1 at the end of the season. So that's the only reason I don't want to go with Gonzaga there. But I really like this Alabama team too. And on the other side, I think Illinois and Ohio State is going to be a good game. I think Ohio State gets closer this time to beating Illinois, but I don't think they get the job done. So I think it's going to be an Illinois-Alabama national championship game. And, Alabama fans don't get too lucky and get to be champions in football consistently, and then in basketball too. So I'm going to go with Illinois to get the job done in the national championship game. I think they're a really good team. I think they're one of the best teams in the country. And I think given my situation with the Final Four, I think that they're the best team there and that they get the job done. But, so we got our 3 national champions here, our picks. Alex and I going with Illinois, and then Jorie going against the grain a little bit and picking Gonzaga. But guys, I know, one last question here, one last segment. And, a lot of people, if they're still filling out their brackets a little bit, this is a tough year to make decisions. And a lot of people still wondering. So any tips that you guys have for anybody filling out a bracket?
Do as much research as you can. Look into all the teams. If you want to really make an accurate bracket, you got to know everything about every team. And that might be a lot. It might be, 64, 68 teams, but, you got to really look into it and see where the matchups are.
Yeah, I couldn't really agree more. That was pretty much what I was going to say. Just make sure you do your research. I feel like when it comes to making brackets, a lot of people always just want to go with their gut feeling. Well, I mean, it certainly helps to know, where these teams finished, how their seasons ended, what their shooting percentages are, anything like that can help you get an edge. You certainly want to know. So make sure you do your research, spend some time on it, because it certainly is a lot of fun if you do well making your bracket.
Yeah, I was going to say, do research and expect the unexpected this year in college basketball. Don't be surprised if one team has a positive test and they have to sit out the tournament, and then Louisville's in there, and then you got a bunch of other teams coming in that really that weren't supposed to be there in the beginning when you picked your bracket. So expect the unexpected, but that'll do it for our show here, our bracket breakdown. Hopefully this gave you some insight to the tournament and got a little better feel for the regions as we talked about them a little bit. But for Jorie Mickens and Alex Leyboldt, I am Liam Plate here. Thank you for watching our NCAA bracket breakdown show, and we'll see you next time.